In this video, we're going to talk about a bunch of tips when you're creating a date table. Some of these will be, things that will help you in your building of the date table, and other things are things to make your life easier once you start using your date table and models. Most of the tips I'll share have M and DAX equivalents. Most of the demo I'll do is in Power Query with M, but at the end I'll also show the DAX version of a number of these. Here's the list of things we're going to go through. I won't go through them now because I'm going to go through them in the demo. But one I definitely wanted to cover is, whatever date table you end up making, one of the nicest things you can do for your fellow report builders in your company or your organization is to make it a data flow, so that then they can bring it into their model, and it fosters consistency. It helps them maybe with do some more advanced stuff, leverage some more advanced stuff that they may not be able to do themselves. It's just a good way to help bring less experienced report builders up the curve faster. And again, if you're finding these videos helpful, please go ahead and hit subscribe. All right, so I'm going to jump over to the query editor window. And normally you would just build a single date table. I've split these into different queries just to show different techniques, and you may choose to adopt one or more of those in building your single date table. And the ones that are just Power Query related, I'm just showing it. I'm not loading those tables, and then there's some tables that you see they're not italicized. I'm going to load those because there's a sort of a demo or sort of a why would you do this aspect to it. All right, so I'm just going to tick down the list. So the first one is a lot of date tables need fiscal columns, quarter, month, year. And I see people doing calculations where they'll have all their dates, and then they'll like check the month of the day, and if it's less than or equal to 10, then do X, otherwise do Y. And that all works fine. But I wanted to share just a really quick and easy way to generate fiscal columns. So if I just sort of start here in my query where I have my list of dates, and there's different ways to generate that list of dates for your date table. It could be dynamic or static, whatever. But it's really just to use the date.add months function or the EO month on the DAX side to just shift your date on the current row out. So in this case, if I have a fiscal year that starts in July, I can just add 6 months to the date, and then get the generate the year function. Same thing with quarter. These are all the same. I'm just shifting out 6 months, and you can see, okay, now January becomes Q3. Same thing with fiscal month. It's fiscal month 7, right? And so, just a quick and easy tip to generate fiscal columns. All right, another one is a little bit unorthodox, but I like to do it sometimes, and this requires that you are fairly comfortable with basic M language. And typically, you'd get to this point in your query, and you need to add a bunch of columns, and you can add individual columns one at a time, and that works perfectly well. But you can also add them as a record, and so sometimes I'll do this. Where if I pop into the pop-up here, just create a bunch of fields at once. And again, you need to know these functions. Of course, you can leverage IntelliSense, but here I'm adding the month number, the month name, the year, the quarter, week, day of week, day. So those are very common ones, but I'm adding them all in one shot as a record, right? And then you see that there, and then all I have to do is expand that, and I've added a bunch of columns at once. And then I would add my change type step as well, and then boom, I've got a whole bunch of things. And this is kind of like on the DAX side, the add columns calendar type approach, where you sort of add all your columns in one shot to get your DAX date table. You may wonder, hey, can I do this without adding the change type step? And yes, you can add your data types in a record as well. And it's just some syntax you need to be aware of. So that this is all the same, but then at the end, I'm adding this, type stuff here, where I'm listing out for each column, each field, what I want the type to be. So month is an integer, month name is a text, etc. And then then I just have the expanded step, and those are already properly typed, and I don't need a change type step. So not a big deal, but just a little trick I thought people may appreciate seeing. All right. The next one is in your date table to use relative indices. A lot of calendars out there. I mean, you can use time intelligence to shift around in time. That's good. That can have performance issues and can be confusing to some, especially when you start nesting functions. I like to add these index columns when I really so I can get really surgical with shifting time around. And you can add them sort of starting from 0 or 1 and going. I like to add these relative indices, which are all relative to now, whether it's the current day, with days from now, weeks, months, quarters, years. And then it really makes it easy on the DAX side to have some sort of dynamic functionality. So assuming this is, refreshing every day, if I go back over here, you know, I could just have sort of DAX measures where so I have a basic total sales measure. I can say, what's the sales for the current month, and all I have to do is, um, use my months from now column equals 0, and then I'm going to, my visual is only going to show the current month. And of course, you can use the relative time filters in the filter panel. That works great too. But this is a way just to do it in your measure. And then, like say I'm doing a month over month change, right? I can sort of harvest what's the current months from now value in the current context, generate the sales for this month, and then I could shift to the previous month with this. And so again, you can get really surgical with, I need to compare it to, you know, um, 3 months from now or between 3 and 6 months from now or something. It makes it pretty easy to do that once you have these relative index columns. All right, next tip. This is one of my favorites, and that's using zero width spaces. One of the things that confuses people when they first start working with date tables or start building their first reports is they go and add, say, the month column, and then they go to use it in a visual, and it goes, April, August. It goes alphabetical, and it confuses them, and then they have to learn about sort by columns. So you have to know how to add the sort by column, how to apply it to sort one column by another. And then also once you start running some more advanced DAX, you have to also remember to remove the filter from any sort by columns. So I like to do is say like in a data flow that people are going to use to set it up so it just works. And that's zero width spaces is one way to do that. Format strings can be another. So in this case, how you typically would do it is, you'd add your columns for month name, and then you'd add a month number column that you're going to use to sort that by. Maybe you have a day name for the day of the week, and then you'd have a day a week number that you would use to sort by. So how I like to do it instead is I wouldn't do these previous 4 rows. I would just do this add month name with zero width spaces. And what a zero width space is just what it says, right? It still applies alphabetically, but it doesn't add any length, to the displayed text. And so what this does is it just does a text.repeat, and the zero width space character is number unichar 8203, and I'm just dynamically calculating based on the month, 12 minus that. And so, January gets the most zero width spaces up front, and then that makes it float to the top alphabetically, February next, and so on. And then just concatenating that with the month name. And same thing with the day of the week name. In that case, I'm taking 6 and subtracting it, and typing those as text. And then if I jump back over to the report side, this is typically what people would see. They'd make a visual and they'd see, the months like this, and they'd have to learn how to do sort by columns, right? And then we'd come over here to the zero width space table, and we'd go to the month name and a sort by column, and then we'd sort it by the month number. And then when we go back, okay, great, now things are sorted correctly. And then again, I build my report, I get a little further along, and then I start removing filters from month name, and then I'm surprised when I don't get the correct results because I forgot to remove the filter from the month number. But you notice with the zero with space approach, it just works out of the box, right? And so people don't need to learn about sort by columns. They can just start building reports. Same thing with the day name, right? It's not in the correct, it's alphabetical here, and it's chronological here, which is what people would expect to see, right? And again, they don't have to learn about zero with spaces and building that, right? You build it, put it in a data flow, and then they're ready to just use it, and they don't have questions or don't run into issues with their DAX. All right. Another really good one is using format strings, and I picked this one up from a SQL BI article where I pick up a lot of my stuff. And in this case, frequently, and I've certainly done this for years, you build out columns that are text that you want to have for something like this, for example, the year month. Well, there's another way to do that that actually gets you some benefits, and it's just using, say I've got my list of dates, I add a year column as usual, but then I just do end of month. And I'm actually intentionally just leaving this as a date. And you see like the month of January has, of course, all the same end of month, and then February. And so when I select this value of January 31st in the end of month, I get all the rows of January. And so now what I can do is just format that differently. And I can do the same thing with end of quarter. These other ones are just typical columns for comparison, year month number. And so if I go back over to the report side, we can see the difference here. So one is you can apply a custom format string. So this is actually the end of month column, and I've applied a format string to it of this. I'll just copy that, and then but really behind the scenes, all it is this. And so again, it shows up in the correct order, right? But I can apply that custom format string, and it just displays in the way I want in the correct order. And then I can also use it in visuals. The top one shows sort of the traditional way it's used, and in this case, I'm using my typical year month column, which is a text value. And if I look at the format options for that on the x-axis, right, I don't have the option to make that chronological or continuous. It's automatically categorical because it's a text value. But if I look at this one uses that end of month column, right? And I've got my display on it. But if I zoom into different values here, you can see that it dynamically changes. And when I get further out, this is automatically shifting to year. And if I zoom in further, like if you had at the week level, whatever, you'd still get the chart, but it's a nicer x-axis experience than what you have here, with the scroll bar and all that kind of stuff. So you can do it, and then if you choose to, you also can come here and go on the x-axis, and I can choose to make it categorical. And then I get that same experience, and it's using that custom format string that I gave it with, the year and the three letters of the date. I think most people would prefer to see this, but you do have the option with that. So you don't necessarily have to make as many of those text columns in your date table as you want, and you get some nicer functionality. All right. All right. So the last thing I want to show is just the concept of when you're building custom calendars, most people will start with a list of dates and then do, elaborate calculations to figure out, which, fiscal year is this in, or, is it the first Thursday of the year, or that kind of stuff. So I've got two examples here. This is the ISO 8601. And so sometimes with a custom calendar, I'll actually build it top down or year first. All right, so in this case, I'm starting with a list of years. Again, this could be generated dynamically or be hard-coded. And then here, I won't go through the whole function, but basically, once you know the logic of what your calculation needs to be, in this case, the ISO 8601, is the first Thursday of the year, or it's the week that contains the first Thursday of the year. And so I've got a function in here that basically looks at the first week, of the year on this current row, and then it calculates, based on the start of week, that the one that has the first Thursday, what it is, and then it goes to the next year. It adds one to the year and does the same calculation, so we get the start of next year, and then I calculate the number of weeks, and so then this will always be 52 or 53, and then for each of those weeks, I'm doing that trick I showed earlier, where I'm just adding a record where I get the date for the start of that week, and then sorry, I get the start of the week, and then I also get the week number in this. And just to show you that it is dynamic, this properly calculated that the year 2020 for ISO 8601 has 53 weeks, or the other ones have 52, right? And that was just for demo, so I really don't need that. But then, expand the weeks. So I'm still at the week level here. Expand that out. I've got those two fields from that record I created, and then add a day for each week. And this is also a record that has two fields, right? So what's the day of the week number, as well as the adding a day to it, to the start date there, to get the actual date field that we're used to, right? So then we expand that. So the first expand was to get all 7 rows expanded, and then we're actually expanding the record on each row, and then I get my day and week and my date, and do that. So again, it's just another technique to consider when you're building a custom calendar. I have a second example here. That's the broadcast calendar, which is another popular calendar out here. And again, same kind of approach, where again, I'm doing some more advanced M stuff here, but similar kinds of thing, where I'm getting started this year, started next year, how many weeks is that, and then expanding things out in a very similar way. And in this case, the 2023 is the year that should have 53 weeks. Okay. One last thing is, you can also, again, hopefully you're not building too many date tables, but you can also, you probably notice some of these have a number of steps just to get to the list of dates, right? I get to this initial table step. Well, so I also have this little function here, and so I look forward to the future state where we are able to sort of have and share custom M functions, which is on the roadmap, and I can just put in text values for a start and an end date, and it automatically generates a list of dates as a table for me, with the right data type, with the right column name, and I have a quicker start to building my date tables. Okay. Okay, there's one other thing I wanted to show, and that is how to do some of these on the DAX side. So if I look over here at my date DAX one here, again, this is a very common pattern to add columns to something created with the calendar function. And I've just got some comments here to show you the equivalent version on the DAX side. So for the one with the 0 width spaces, this is how you would approach. Again, you'd use the rep function here, again with that same unichar number 8203 for the 0 width spaces, the same kind of logic where you do 12 minus the month number, or 7 minus the month number. Remember, Power Query does 0 to 6, DAX does 1 to 7. So this is how you would generate those same 0 width space text values that sort correctly in the right order. For like the fiscal year, quarter, month, these are all the same. Again, I'm just using the EO month function to shift it out. In this case, it's the July to June fiscal calendar. If it was October, you'd add 3 months, that kind of thing, to get that offset to simplify your fiscal quarter calculations. And then for the format strings, again, you could generate, this is just the end of month example, where you just, every row has the same value for the end of month for that month. You could do the same thing with end of quarter. So that's the same thing on the DAX side. And then for the relative index columns, you could use these date diff function with the different things. So look at the day, week, month, quarter level, but in each case, you're comparing today to whatever the date is on the current row and generate these relative indices. Okay, so if you choose to make it as a date as a DAX table, you can't share that as a data flow, of course. But if you prefer to build in DAX, here's how to leverage those same techniques on the DAX side. Okay. All right. So I think that's everything. And again, just want to remind you again, if you figure out how to build this custom calendar for your company or your department, go ahead and make it as a data flow, right? And it'll foster consistency and it'll help your fellow report builders, build better reports faster. Okay. Thanks.